Part 19. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 181. As expected, Miss Joy, who had not mentioned anything about the situation in Tokiwa City before, said most of it to Professor Oak. The situation was even more troublesome than Shiu had imagined, but under the instruction of Professor Oak, Shiu still expressed some of his ideas. Miss Joy's idea was to maintain order, at least until the people above came down. But Shiu's decision was always risky, with breaking the situation first and pursuing active attack. Isn't this risky? If it drags on like this, I believe Miss Joy is very clear about the direction of the situation. When the tourists gather together, it will really be over. How could Miss Joy not know? No one who can do this position is simple. She immediately fixed her eyes, slapped her hands on the table, stood up and said, "Okay." Shiu stood aside, watching Professor Oak talking in front of the camera, and his background was the entrance of the Pokemon Center. At this time, some people with luggage walked in one after another, and the camera followed. Professor Oak interacted with the tourists on the side, roughly explaining the situation and inspection steps, and also gave some guarantee conditions. After the filming was finished, the tourists changed their clothes and returned to their posts. They were just ordinary employees of the Pokemon Center. After the short film was finished, Professor Oak walked towards Shiu. "Director, the propaganda car over there has already set off. The tourists will be here soon. Let's go to your store now." Shiu smiled and got into the car, sat in the driver's seat, and started the car after Professor Oak got in. "Is this your strategy? Mastering the direction of public opinion is a key to controlling the public. Besides, the propaganda car used for the celebration publicity and the battle camera team at the venue are completely ready-made resources. It would be a waste to leave them there. It is better to use them." The vehicle was driving on the street, and the propaganda car with a loudspeaker was in front, constantly replaying the project of the Pokemon Center's opening for rescue. The surrounding tourists began to be attracted by the news and walked towards the Pokemon Center. At the same time, the TV program is being prepared. After the store is filmed, it can be sent to the TV station, and then it can be seen on TV in the whole city. At that time, both the residents of Viridian City and the tourists can receive positive information, so it will not be too easy for the rocket team to fool them. $0 shopping, smashing and looting did not occur. Without the restraint of ordinary people, Joey had the strength to contain the rockets. Shiu's move was a sure kill. Of course, this was also based on the fact that Joey had not completely lost his power. Otherwise, the TV station would not care about you, and you could do whatever you wanted. But at this moment, there was a sudden explosion in the distance, and Shiu could see the rising smoke across several streets. "It seems that your methods have forced those people into a hurry." Dr. Oak seemed very calm. "These unexpected attacks will naturally be handled by the corresponding people, and it is most important for them to do their own things well." Shiu drove silently and gradually increased the speed. Several accidents broke out along the way, but they were all handled by Joey's people and the international police. However, the rockets may not have expected that these emergencies would strengthen the choice of tourists, and more people would go to the Pokemon Center. When they came to the store, it was a regular storefront, and there was nothing on display. All they could see was the rolling shutter door that was half pulled down. Shiu walked forward and bent down to get in, and saw that Xiao Yuan was holding a book with his head tilted to one side. It looked like he was reading a book and then fell asleep accidentally. Piku was squatting on the goods on the side, also dozing off, but it woke up as soon as Shiu came in, looking at him with a pair of small eyes. "Hey," Shiu called out, and Xiao Yuan on the chair suddenly woke up, stood up and looked over, and the book in her hand fell directly to the ground. When she found out that it was Shiu, she raised her hand and rubbed her eyes, speaking with a little breath that was not awake yet. "Why did you scare me?" Open the door. Xiu didn't say much, turned around and pushed the door up. The cameraman had already set up the camera, and the staff gradually took their positions. Professor Oak stood aside and looked at him with a smile. Prepare to start the camera, Xiu shouted, directing on the spot. The staff of the follow-up Pokemon Center had also come over, and several people in plain clothes began to prepare to line up skillfully. Xiao Yuan didn't even understand what was going on, and was stunned. What are you doing? Xiu turned around and looked at her, pulled her away, and said to the young lady next to him, she doesn't look good and has no affinity. You should be the store owner. O'Hara was dumbfounded. What was going on? Why was she excluded? But it had already started here. She could only watch the young lady take her seat, then recite the lines given by Xiu to the camera, complete the transaction with the actor, and Dr. Oak introduced the store on the side. Why are you reacting like this? Xiu stepped aside after explaining it. Seeing her frown, he couldn't help but ask. O'Hara looked very angry, but he tried his best to lower his voice in front of everyone, gritted his teeth and said, I prepared it for a day. Who knew that Xiu's eyes were still on the store door, with a faint smile on his face, but his tone became a little serious, and whispered to O'Hara's ear, stupid, I'm protecting you. Xiao Yuan frowned and looked over. When she saw the camera, she remembered something. Her face began to panic. She grabbed Xiu's arm and looked up at his face. I'm sorry. That's enough. Xiu patted her hand gently and took it away. Be smart. Don't just see the benefits and the wind behind. Halfway through, Xiu suddenly noticed two people in simple clothes walking across the street. Xiao Yuan wondered why Xiu stopped. Just as she was about to follow Xiu's gaze to look over there, Xiu pulled her to the other side. Don't look, where's the pokeball of the giant claw mantis? With a quick mind, Xiao Yuan took the opportunity to turn around and stuff the pokeball into Xiu's hand. She asked a little nervously, what should I do? Just follow me. Xiu just glanced at it and didn't look over there again. Instead, he seemed very casual. This calmness greatly comforted Xiao Yuan, but she didn't notice that she kept leaning on Xiu. It seems that she is not as calm as she looks. Before the short film was finished, the two people suddenly accelerated their pace and walked towards the side quickly. Xiu didn't react, but Xiao Yuan couldn't control himself and turned his head to look over. This look made the two men run quickly, reaching their hands towards their waists. Xiao Yuan had never seen such a scene before, and his face changed, but the next second, a ball of white matter shot out from nowhere, unfolding in the air to form a net that entangled the two people, and white matter shot out one after another, soon entangled them into a large white cocoon. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 182. O'Hara looked around in horror, and then he found a strange figure on the tree beside the road at the door. A strange elf that he had never seen before. It's okay, that's Ariados, the people at the Elf Center will protect this place, Xiu explained belatedly. Several people walked out of the van parked on the side of the road, and that person was the team that Xiu had contacted before. Xiu saw them very skillfully lift the cocoon into the car, and then the car drove away, and the other three people stayed where they were and walked towards Xiu. The leader was the captain. The filming team on the other side was also attracted by the situation here, stopped their work, and looked over here. It's okay, you continue, speed up. Xiu briefly explained, rearranged the filming, and then looked at the team that had come here, and took the initiative to greet them. Hello. Hello. The captain looked at the person in front of him, always feeling a sense of incomprehension. He was sure that this person had noticed the situation just now, but he always had a calm expression, which was a bit scary. At the same time, he became more and more curious about this person's strength. However, when he was about to speak to test it, Xiu said first. This is the person sent by the Elf Center. This is the boss, Mr. Yuan. You can discuss the store's defense. Xiu didn't want to communicate too much. After throwing the matter to the boss Xiao Yuan, he joined the shooting guidance again. Xiao Yuan didn't shirk it, and really discussed it with the captain seriously. The shooting here was completed quickly. The shooting team was going to the TV station, while Xiu and Dr. Oak stopped. Similarly, several actors also stayed. This was the manpower that Xiu asked Miss Joy for, otherwise Xiao Yuan alone would not be able to support this place. This is left to you. The doctor and I have things to deal with. When he got on the car again, Dr. Oak asked a question. You don't have enough food stored. Xiu smiled softly when he heard this, and didn't mean to explain. Instead, he nodded and admitted it. That's right. If the warehouse is fully supplied, it may not be able to support one day. However, ordinary people have food at home. As long as stable information is given, they will not blindly purchase. The food is enough for 2 days. After 2 days. Xiu sneered and added in a strange tone, if Joey can't react in 2 days, it won't be of any use even if there are more. The collapse of Viridian City will only take a moment. Dr. Oak also understood what Xiu meant, but a trace of worry still appeared on his face. Xiu had nothing to say about Dr. Oak's character of worrying about the country and the people, and just drove back to the Pokemon Center. As expected, after the propaganda, more tourists went here. Because the importance of inspection was emphasized when the news was released before, no one dared to make trouble, and the progress of things was a bit too smooth. Why are you frowning? Dr. Oak noticed the change in Xiu's expression and asked a little strangely. Now, according to the development of the situation, what means do you think the other party has to stir up trouble? The panic has been suppressed. Without these ordinary people, it is difficult for them to have room for activities under the powerful treatment ability of the Pokemon Center. After all, the loss of those people is real, and Joey can be rescued as long as he is not dead, and the endurance is here. I always feel something is wrong. Xiu will not think that those people will just give up, because this is their last chance. If they fail, Joey will not give them any more chances. So madness will definitely bring destruction. Xiu can't rest assured until he is completely out of this crisis. Here, we use the reputation of Professor Oak to attract tourists, but we still need to comfort them. Doctor, you go and do your work. I will take the convoy to the warehouse to get food. Dr. Oak's task is still very heavy. He needs to comfort everyone, so Xiu wants Dr. Oak as a lecturer to open a popular science program to explain basic Pokemon knowledge to ordinary people. Anyway, there are many trainers among the tourists, and Pokemon are also strange and varied, enough to talk about for 2 days. This can not only reduce the fear of ordinary people for Pokemon, but also give them something to talk about. I know. Dr. Oak seemed a little helpless, but he also knew that Xiu's idea was right, but it was a little troublesome for him. After they separated, Xiu found the truck arranged by the Pokemon Center and followed several staff members to the warehouse. Along the way, he found that the situation was still not optimistic, but he had no choice. When he came to the warehouse, because it was quite secretive and not exposed, it was naturally safe. However, his car must have been exposed after the strip, and then protecting the warehouse would involve a lot of problems. However, this is Miss Joy's headache. Now Xiu is not dependent on her, but cooperating. Come on. Brothers move things. Xiu got off the car and opened the door. 2 brothers got off the car here, holding a pokeball in each hand, and then 4 Goryeo appeared on the field. Leave it to us, the staff of the Pokemon Center started loading the goods. Xiu was able to be lazy for a while and found Xiao Chun hiding in the goods. Xiao Chun didn't seem to react, but he could still feel a sense of tension. It's me. Xiu approached and comforted softly, it's just someone coming to load the goods, don't be nervous. Xiao Yuan made a few gestures and took Xiu into the warehouse. Then he was dumbfounded to see two strangers lying on the ground. Xiu frowned, glanced outside, and released Casey from the elf ball with his backhand. Just by looking at each other, Casey understood what Xiu meant and connected the two people. "What's going on?" Xiu asked while checking the situation of the two people. Fortunately, they were only knocked unconscious and their lives were not in danger. "These two people want to sneak into the warehouse." Xiao Kun's expression did not fluctuate much, and he just said casually. "Xiu's inspection has probably been completed. The two of them don't look like trainers. They don't have elf-related items on them, and they don't appear to have participated in training. Judging from his clothing style and the tattoos on his body, he looks a bit like an ordinary gangster." Xiu raised his hand to rub his chin, a trace of hesitation flashed across his face. "Did they see you? There must be something wrong with these two people, and he prefers to handle it himself rather than leaving it to the elf center. A fight." Xiao Chun's words were concise and to the point, and at the same time he became more determined on Xiu's idea, and turned to walk outside. "With the help of the elves, one powerful person can take over the workload of 3 people, and those people will soon finish moving here." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 183. You guys go back first. I have some things to deal with here. Remember to be careful on the road. We may have been targeted. Understood. The staff of the Elf Center always look professional. Those two people are not just here to move things. The elves in their hands are enough to deal with ordinary accidents. After they left, Xiao Chun walked out of the pile of goods. Take a rest. You've worked hard. Xiu smiled gently at her. But Xiao Chun raised her hand and pointed at her abdomen. Did the wound just now break? Xiu's smile fell, and he looked a little nervous and leaned towards her. But Xiao Chun shook his head, his expression changed a little, and his finger pointed at his lower abdomen again. Xiu frowned and asked, "Are you hungry?" Kathy on the side seemed to be unable to watch it, and said faintly, "She wants to go to the toilet." Xiu only then reacted. I guess the nervousness she showed just now was due to physiological reasons, not psychological problems, and her face looked a little embarrassed. Because this is just a warehouse, there are no supporting living facilities, and naturally there is no toilet. However, there are abandoned houses not far away, which should be left by the supervisor at that time. She didn't go there, probably because of Xiu's instructions this morning. You can actually go out of the warehouse, I just asked you not to run around." Xiu didn't expect her to be so obedient, and he felt a little guilty for leaving her here for a whole morning. "It's not convenient for you to walk now, I'll let Casey take you there." Casey didn't even open his eyes and floated directly outside, and Xiao Chun also slowly floated up. Xiu turned to look at the two street urchins, tied them up with ropes, and then woke one of them up. The man woke up in a panic, but his first reaction was to protect his head desperately, repeating a few words back and forth in his mouth. "Let me go. I don't know anything. I didn't see anything." Looking at his useless appearance, Xiu raised his foot and kicked him, scaring the guy so much that he quickly shrank his body to prevent exposing vulnerable parts, and at the same time he did not forget to shout, "Don't hit my face! Don't hit my face!" Looking at his posture, it was obvious that he had been beaten a lot, otherwise he would not be so skilled. "Humph," Xiu sneered, leaned over and grabbed his hair and pulled him up, and said sternly, "What are you doing here? The only outrageous thing is that this guy didn't open his eyes even so, and still begged for mercy. Open your eyes and look at me." Xiu found it more and more interesting, and reached out to pry his eyelids, but this guy would rather roll his eyes than look over. No, no. I know the rules, I will die if I see my brother. Xiu was directly amused by this, and said casually, it's a pity that the rules here are different. If you don't look at me, I will die immediately. A bone knife appeared in Xiu's hand as his fingers flew, and gradually pressed towards the man. Although he rolled his eyes, the man also vaguely felt that something was wrong, and immediately calmed down. His eyes recovered, and he looked at the knife in Xiu's hand, and his hands and feet stopped moving at the same time. Xiu threw him to the ground and asked, what you say determines whether you can walk out of here alive, you decide. The moment the man landed, his eyes first swept around the surrounding environment, and when he saw that his companions were still there, he really looked at Xiu. When he saw that Xiu was just a teenager, his expression changed again, and he pleaded with a pitiful look. I drank too much last night and wandered around the street. I don't know how I ended up here. That means you have no value, and you can't live. Xiu knew what he was thinking, and the knife was turning in his hand. But he was scared before Xiu finished speaking, and quickly explained, I was just wandering around and looking for a place to sleep. Who knew there were people here? I was knocked unconscious as soon as I came in, and we really didn't do anything. It's still useless, Xiu said with sarcasm, and his attitude was unclear. Brother, ask whatever you want to know. I really didn't mean to break in. Still playing dumb, Xiu's expression condensed, and he shouted sternly, you know why you reacted that way just now. If you can't explain it, don't think about leaving here today. The man's expression gradually calmed down after hearing Xiu's words, and he seemed to know that Xiu couldn't fool him. Xiao Chun just came back with Casey after using the toilet, and Xiu's eyes changed immediately. Ask a hammer. It just so happens that he and Casey need experimental subjects to improve the way to invade the brain. Isn't this a ready-made candidate? Xiu's malicious intentions were not concealed. Not only Casey and Xiao Chun felt it, but the man also felt it. But he just felt a chill and didn't understand what was going to happen. The next second, he floated up as if he was weightless. After finishing, Xiu fell into deep thought, standing there blankly, and the man fell directly to the ground, no longer making any sound. This test Xiu obtained a lot of special information, and he became more and more clear about the situation of the human brain. At the same time, he also got the information he wanted. This person is indeed related to the Rockets, but not directly, but indirectly. The gangster boss is from the Rockets, and these two are a small gang under his control. And this time it was because someone in this group saw the situation of the convoy that day. Although Xiu took a detour when planning the route and changed the packaging and shipped it in batches, it still inevitably attracted some people's attention. These two people were sent by the group to observe. In fact, the small group did not know the real purpose of the rocket team. They just collected some information based on the current situation and reported it in order to gain some benefits. It's a pity that the little leader was too smart. Xiu's eyes slowly moved to the fallen body with an indifferent expression. If you provoke him, you can only go there. Xiao Chun had been paying attention to Xiu's state just now. When she saw her looking at the body, she raised her hand and made a few gestures, and her mouth made a few sounds. Xiu seemed to wake up and turned to look at her, but he didn't have the ability to understand sign language, so he could only rely on telepathy. Do you need help? Xiao Chun pointed to the body on the ground, you seem to be in trouble. Xiu shook his head slowly and smiled, don't you worry. But didn't the memory you gave me say that partners need to help each other? Xiao Chun couldn't understand Xiu's meaning, which was contrary to her feeling. Ha ha ha! Xiu laughed out loud when he heard her words and explained. That's true. It's normal for friends to help each other, but don't bother others with things that are within your ability. Similarly, you don't have to help everyone. You have to combine your own abilities and your own willingness. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 184. Said Xiu, congratulations on your gradual understanding of interpersonal communication. You will learn slowly in the future. I just say that I can refuse those I don't like, Xiao Chun said, and it seemed that he was obviously a little unconfident. That's right, number 7 is dead. You picked it? Now you are Xiao Chun. There is no organization here, and no one forces you to perform tasks. Xiu said easily, and pinched the other person casually. The person who was still in a coma suddenly had some reaction, but soon fell silent again. Xiao Chun looked at Xiu's figure in front of him, and there was an inexplicable glimmer in his eyes. After dealing with the warehouse, Xiu changed into a set of clothes and took the opportunity to stroll around Changpan City. Looking all the way, Changpan City is really in chaos, but it's just that those who hoard goods and make a fortune are in chaos first. Under Xiu's various methods of suppression, the price of food could not rise at all, and those people's early preparations were in vain. Those merchants who control Changpan City don't know how much money they have spent on preparations in order to eat the blood of others, but they didn't expect to trap themselves instead. If they can't get this money back, they will definitely be finished. But now they are still calm and have not lowered the price. Instead, they are pretending to be dead, as if they are sure that the food in the Pokemon Center is limited. But Xiu is not in a hurry either. He is not a man who only keeps one trump card. I don't know if those people can still be so calm after he plays his second card tomorrow. Although Xiu sold this wave at a price close to the cost price, he can be said to have made the best advertisement without spending any money. With the support of Professor Oak and the Pokemon Center, the reputation of this store has been established in one day. The whole city already knows about this store. What kind of advertisement can have such an effect? No matter how much money is spent, it is impossible to make those two people support a store that appeared inexplicably at the same time. At the same time, the battles that broke out in various places are getting more and more intense. Xiu even heard about the melee of a 10-man team, but it is obvious that those people can't outlast the people with the background of the Pokemon Center. Some recruited individual trainers patrolling and official fast-moving motorcades can be seen on the streets, but few ordinary people go in and out of them. Being able to arrange all this properly, and there have been no mistakes until now, it can be seen from here that Miss Joy is absolutely capable, at least her execution is very strong. It's just that she was unintentional in the front, and the background she relied on was limited, which made it a bit difficult. But at that time, she didn't let Team Rocket succeed. Xiu was like a ghost, wandering in Viridian City, silently observing what happened there. Until Xiu ate the last bite of bread on a bench by the roadside, then kneaded the package into a ball in his hands, and looked up at the surrounding environment. Night fell. He got up and walked towards the distance, throwing garbage into the trash can when passing by. Xiu walked into the old city. Unlike the solemn atmosphere on the streets over there, this side seems more ordinary. Because those who can survive here are either poor people who are not afraid of anything, or people with strength. In other words, a force like Team Rocket that grows by recruiting ruffians and hooligans, this is its real headquarters. Official activities often stop here. Although it is unreasonable, the official people who come here may not be defeated. Of course, there are many poor families here who have no money to move out and can only linger here. But Xiu came here today not for relief or research, he has more important things to do. From the memories of the two people, it is known that the composition of the rocket team is destined to have various messy factions inside, which also represents the division of territory. Xiu came to a bar in the old city and looked at it from a distance. A two-story building, the outside is shabby, the doorplate is crooked, the neon lights on it have been extinguished for the most part, and the remaining ones can't form a pattern font, giving people a messy feeling. There are two hooligans guarding the door, standing crooked like a crooked tree, and they seem to be chatting about something. Xiu didn't mean to go in from the front. Such bars all have back doors. Xiu went around and easily entered after passing through the houses next to them. Unlike the shabby outside, the decoration inside is quite interesting. It looks like a dance hall in the 1980s and 1990s, full of history. The bar stools, the dance floor in the middle, and various booths around. The city has been under curfew, but it is still lively here, with colorful lights flowing wildly, singing deafeningly, and some messy people waving their bodies in the middle of the dance floor. They are still so playful at this time, I don't know how long they can play. Xiu didn't care much, and after standing for a while, he walked towards the second floor. In a luxurious private room on the second floor, the middle table was filled with various snacks and randomly stacked wine bottles, and several people were sitting on the sofa and shouting wantonly. "Do you remember the old guy today? We just took some things and you still want to resist." A young man smashed the beer bottle in his hand off the table, with an exaggerated expression on his face, as if he was imitating something, and spoke with his hands and feet. When he talked about the excitement, he couldn't help laughing wildly, and his expression became more ferocious. "Ha ha ha. Did you see what he looked like when I kicked him and he rolled to the ground? Those guys are just bastards, we have to beat them up. Don't they know we have elves in our hands? If those bastards hadn't come so fast, I really wanted to kill that old guy. He actually ripped my clothes off. They won't be able to hold on for a few more days. Now Jaban City is getting more and more chaotic. We must make them look good when it collapses. It's so chaotic. I'm going to make a lot of money this time. The messy the better. When will we ever have fun like this?" Speaking of this, one of them looked at the young man sitting in the middle, and a very lewd smile suddenly appeared on his drunken face, and asked him, "Brother, when you are done with it, can we?" But before this guy could finish speaking, the door was suddenly opened and a man walked in from the outside. The young people sitting inside were stunned when they saw someone coming in. This is their territory, and there should be someone guarding it outside. How could a stranger come in so arrogantly? It's safe to say they didn't expect anyone to open the door at all. When those people were in a daze, a huge black shadow suddenly appeared on the door frame behind the visitor. He walked in with his waist bent, dragging two people with the pliers in his hand. After entering, he threw them out. The leading young man recognized the two young men at a glance as the boys guarding the door outside, and the man below spoke. "Haha, there are quite a lot of people here, I don't need to look for them one by one." Xiu happily accepted the unexpected surprise, walked in with a smile and closed the door behind his back. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 185. The moment the door closed, the 5 people inside reacted and took out their pokeballs and threw them at Xiu. Arbok, Beedrill, Ratutta X3. Xiu took a step back, and a tall figure of more than 2 meters blocked him, almost covering him. These little hooligans had never seen such a terrifying Pokemon as Mantis, and they all showed fear of the unknown and were a beat slower. But Xiu had no intention of letting them go, and said lightly, "Do it." A white light flashed on Mantis's body, and its already powerful momentum increased a few points out of thin air, and its tall body rushed forward. Xiu's words also woke up the opposite side, and the leader raised his hand and shouted to Xiu, "He is alone, and we are all our people here, why are we afraid of him? Go." With an order, those people commanded the Pokemon to rush forward. Arbok twisted his body quickly and rushed forward along the bottom of the sofa. The Beedrill raised both hands, and its bone guns were coated with white light, swinging forward. Several big rats did not seem clumsy at all in this space, but were extremely flexible. 2 of them cooperated with their teammates to besiege the giant claw mantis, and one bypassed and rushed towards Xiu. Facing the newcomer, the giant claw mantis was unstoppable. It raised its hand and easily clamped the Arbok that was coiling forward, and then used it as a long whip to swing at the beedrill. The beedrill had to subconsciously restrain its attack when it saw the Arbok flying over, but it did not expect the brute force it carried. The two were entangled and fell to the side, and stopped when they hit the wall. However, the giant claw mantis did not stop, but took the initiative to rush in front of the two ratas, opened its claws and clamped the two ratas one by one, and then suddenly exerted force to directly cut off the rata's spine, and then it was thrown back at those people. Of course, it saw the rata that slipped away, and took advantage of its height advantage to stop it in front of Shiu in a few steps. The rata had no intention of fighting at all, and wanted to slip away from under the giant mantis. However, the giant mantis did not intend to give it this opportunity. It closed its claws into a fist and leaned forward to swing it. There was only a bang in the air, and the fist instantly approached the rata, colliding with its hardest skull. The giant mantis was stable, but the rata was directly hit into the ground by it. A pit appeared on the ground. Although the rata's head was not blown up, the powerful force indirectly broke the spine connected to it. Direct death. It can be seen that the giant mantis has a special feeling for the rata. It took action to get rid of 3 ratas at once. The process was not delayed, and all of them were rushing to their lives. The first round here ended. The powerful fighting power of the giant mantis completely shattered the opponent's fluke mentality, leaving only panic. On the contrary, Shiu still stood in his original position without moving a step. Even when the rata attacked just now, he did not panic at all. He just looked at the situation on the field coldly. It was not until the giant mantis punched Rata's head that a smile appeared on his face. The giant mantis slowly stood up, with its bloody hands hanging down. A trace of blood gathered on its hands under the action of gravity, and then dripped on the ground to bloom blood flowers. This time, the tall figure of the giant mantis enveloped the 5 people. Arbok and Beedrill did not lose their fighting ability and quickly stood up from the ground. However, the instant they took over just now made them understand the gap in strength between the two sides, and they did not resume the attack immediately, but stayed by the wall. The leading young man also felt the gap between the two sides, and changed his arrogance just now, but lowered his posture to compliment a few words, and then asked the reason. "Brother, you are so powerful. I don't know how I offended you. If there is any offense, please talk slowly. Why do you have to fight?" Hashiu sneered and stepped forward. "What? You ask someone to go to my warehouse, and now you don't even know who I am." When Shiu said this, the young man's face changed. He didn't care about the 4 people around him at all. He turned around and ran towards the window with all his strength, and at the same time he didn't forget to shout, "Arbok, break the window." It was only a few steps away from the window. As long as he jumped out from here, he could escape. Anyway, the second floor was not very high, and there would not be much damage to his life if he jumped down. However, Arbok did not respond to his words. Instead, it coiled in the same place stupidly, with its snake head facing the giant mantis. The young man didn't care so much. He put his arms in front of him and tried to break the window. But the next second, the young man hit it, not only failed to break through the glass, but was bounced back and fell to the ground, groaning. Shiu was speechless when he saw this scene. My goodness, do you think you are filming a movie? Don't you see what kind of window this is? Metal railings, let alone people bumping into it, even a giant mantis might not be able to break it. The remaining 4 young men didn't react to the boss's appearance, and they were all a little dumbfounded. "Heh. With such a big brother, you are just like this." Shiu opened his hands towards them, and a blue wave emerged, instantly occupying the room, and Casey's figure slowly floated up from behind Shiu. After a while, Shiu slowly opened his eyes. His expression was a little dazed, and it took a while for him to recover. It was a huge burden for him to look through the memories of so many people, and only Casey's strong superpowers could support it. He can also get a lot of useful information from these experiments, which is very useful for further optimization and improvement. These are only indirect gains. The real gain is that Chiu got some information about Team Rocket's actions from the little boss. The little boss is directly under Team Rocket, while the other four are not. They are the subordinates recruited by the little boss himself. However, the elves in the hands of these four people are supported by Team Rocket. Although they are all rotten fish and shrimps, they can still deal with ordinary people and individual trainers. For example, these people followed Team Rocket to destroy the city today, and they can achieve results with the advantage of numbers and familiarity with the terrain. They took advantage of the chaos to rob some ordinary people's homes and robbed a lot of property. To some extent, this is why Team Rocket sent the elves down. No matter how they are used, they can bring burdens to the city and involve Joey's energy. In addition to celebrating today's gains, they also gathered here to determine tomorrow's snatching route and target. As for the matter of the two small fish, the little boss seemed to have forgotten it and was immersed in flattery and joy. Xiu was afraid that this guy would do something at the beginning, but he didn't expect that he was just a waste. It was just an accident when he found it at the beginning. Xiu looked at the people lying on the ground, a look of disgust appeared on his face, and then he looked at the two shivering elves. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 186. Just stay still. Shuaki waved, and the pokeball was pulled out of thin air and flew towards the two of them. The two elves were taken back without any intention of struggling. Let's deal with it. Xiu curled his lips calmly and took out a tool to extract the teeth of the three ratas. And Casey, who had been staying safely by Xiu's side, slowly opened his eyes, and his powerful superpower instantly erased all traces of the room, leaving only the fist pit. Then he used his superpower to pull those people up. Xiu walked out of the door. The expression on his face was extremely exaggerated. He had never seen such an exaggerated smile on his face, and his eyes revealed an almost crazy paranoia. It was only when he closed the door with his backhand that he calmed down again, his expression as calm as usual. After solving these problems, Xiu did not leave immediately. Instead, he moved to another room on the second floor, opened the door and walked in. The situation here is like a dog kennel, there is an unpleasant sour smell, and there are a few dirty clothes on the bed. But that's not the point. The point is the person huddled in the corner of the room. It was a young girl whose hands and feet were tied, her eyes were covered with strips of cloth, and her mouth was sealed with tape. She could only scream woo. She obviously heard the sound of the door opening just now, and fear had already filled her heart. But her struggle was in vain. If she could have run away, she would have run away long ago. How could she wait until Xiu came over? Xiu looked at her and did not rush to untie her hands and feet. Instead, he pulled down the cloth covering her eyes and comforted her, "Don't be afraid, I'm here to save you." At this moment, the two looked at each other. The girl didn't see Guo Xiu and stopped struggling for a moment. And Xiu found that this man had been crying for an unknown amount of time. His eyes were bloodshot and his eye sockets were swollen. At first glance, he gave people a pitiful feeling. Coupled with the cowering look of squatting in the corner, Xiu's calming mood also fluctuated slightly for a moment, but he soon calmed down. "Don't move, I'll untie you." Xiu tried his best to make his voice gentler, reached out to untie her hands and feet, and then tore off the sealing tape. The girl didn't expect it to be untied, and looked a little dazed. Xiu didn't give her time to think, and pulled her up directly. "Can I still leave?" "Then follow me and I'll take you out." Xiu held her hand and walked out of the room, then walked downstairs in a big way. So many things happened above, but things were still singing and dancing below, without much fluctuation. Xiu had no intention of staying and took her out of the bar through the back door. "Where is your home? I will take you back." As soon as Xiu went out, he asked the girl, but the girl didn't seem to react yet. She looked at the surrounding environment with a look of disbelief. "Why did you come out by yourself?" It wasn't until Xiu's question that she drew her attention back, and she spoke stumblingly. "My home is." After all, after reading the memories of those people, Xiu actually knew the location of her home, but it was impossible to take her home directly. Otherwise, all the cover-up efforts he had just done would be in vain. He might as well just catch her and fly back to her home. Xiu led her walking on the quiet streets at night. He didn't mean to speak. The girl was also in a daze, and she didn't know what she was thinking. Just like that, we returned to her home. Xiu looked at the building in front of him. It was a self-built 2.5-story house. The situation of the girl's family was not too bad. It should be at a well-off level. This is a relatively remote place. Most of the buildings are self-built houses. There is no such thing as real estate. It is also far away from the central areas and the protection intensity is naturally a little worse. It is also because of this that it becomes the target of those miscellaneous fish. Don't tell anyone else what happened tonight. Just say that you escaped on your own. After Xiu said the next sentence, he turned around and left. When the girl heard this, she suddenly turned around and looked at Xiu's back. She was about to say something, but was interrupted. "Go home, don't let your family worry." These words reminded her of something, and soon fear came to her mind. She subconsciously turned around and looked at the dim light of her home. But when she looked back again to look for Xiu, she didn't see anyone. The girl looked confused and glanced back and forth a few times, but she couldn't see any trace of his presence. Such bizarre things made her a little strange. But when she was left alone, fear gradually surrounded her, and she was so frightened that she hurried to the door of her house, knocked on the door, and shouted something. Soon the door was opened and a couple came out. When they saw the girl, they became emotional and moved forward to hug her. The girl couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into tears. Not far away, a person in the darkness saw the scene and then turned and left. There was only one figure left wandering on the deserted street. The morning light fell slightly, and the sky was still gray, as if covered with a layer of gauze. On a bench on the street, a person sat alone, chewing something slowly in his mouth, with a half-eaten piece of bread in his hand. After a while, Xiu swallowed the last bite of bread, picked up the water bottle on the side and took a sip. After he calmed down a little, he got on a motorcycle and drove towards the distance. Only then was the scene behind him revealed, which was a cemetery in the suburbs. Bar. At this time, the entire bar had taken a break, and only the cleaners were walking around. Two young people watching the show were chatting casually in the booth. "Why weren't we chosen? We're no worse than those few. Didn't the boss say he would take us to play this morning? We must have a share. You must have drunk too much. This is not the first time this has happened. How can you drink too much? Didn't they kidnap a girl yesterday? The boss must be too tired last night. Hey hey hey. They had so much fun last night. It was so cool. Hey. We are going to get one back today." The two people smiled obscenely, and the topic quickly deviated. But after a while, there was a scream from upstairs followed by the sound of something falling. The two spectators noticed this and immediately got up and walked up to the second floor. As soon as they walked up, they saw the cleaner running outside with a look of horror on his face, shouting something vague. "Dead, run away." The cleaner ignored the two men and simply knocked them away and stumbled away from the second floor. The two of them were surprised by the behavior of the cleaner. It was not the first day he had done this. "What happened today? The two of them walked towards the inside with doubts, but just halfway through they found a red trace flowing along the ground, which was in a semi-dry state, and there were several footprints on the ground. My eyes followed the traces, extending to the other side of the room. The door of the room had been opened just now, and there were tools discarded by the cleaner at the door. It seemed that they had flowed out from the crack of the door. The two of them looked a little surprised, and one of them said to himself, "No way, are you kidding that person to death?" As they spoke, the two of them walked forward. As soon as they got closer, they smelled a strong smell of blood, and their bodies instinctively felt strange. Uneasiness appeared on the two people's faces, but they still endured the discomfort and walked to the door and looked inside. It's just that the scene in the room was really terrifying. This sight made the two of them turn pale, their whole bodies were occupied by fear, and their brains seemed to have lost the ability to think and went completely blank. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 187. The scene inside the room was weird. 7 people sat neatly on the sofa in different postures. Some of them even held bottles of wine in their hands. They looked drunk. But the strange thing was that these people were only broken to the neck, and their heads were not on the body at all. The muscles at the broken end were uneven, as if the head was twisted off alive by brute force. Some of them could still leave most of their necks, but some were directly broken in the middle, revealing the yellow spine, and even worse, the throat was pulled out and forcibly broken, leaving half of it hanging on the body. As for the heads of those people, they were neatly piled up and placed in the direction of the door. These people seemed to have their heads removed when they were awake, and their facial features were distorted to a limit that humans could not, but they were all full of fear and pain, and their eyes were bulging out. The ground was full of blood flowing, and finally merged into a stream and flowed out from the crack of the door. As soon as the two opened the door, they looked at the heads inside, and just one look seemed to make them fall into some kind of despair. One person subconsciously raised his hand and slapped his companion, but his action made the man even more frightened. His legs softened and he fell to the ground, making a meaningless cry. Ah! The man suddenly found that his hand felt a little sticky. He looked subconsciously and saw that he was sitting on the blood stain, with his right hand covered in blood. Ah! An even more exaggerated cry came out. The man didn't care about anything else at all. He rolled and crawled from the corridor and rushed outside, shouting loudly. "Someone is dead! Someone is dead! The boss is dead!" The other one was a little better, but he couldn't help but turn around and run away when he saw his companion like this. A residential building somewhere in Tokiwa City. Before dawn, an old woman with gray hair and haggard expression got up from the chair, looked up at the gray sky outside, sighed, and walked into the room. This slight sound startled the person on the bed, who struggled to get up, and a slightly hoarse voice sounded. "Wake up! Hey! You're not well yet." The old woman hurried over when she heard this, sat down beside the bed and supported him. "Don't worry, it's just a sprain." "I'm fine." The old man sat up slowly, leaned on the pillow, and smiled at his wife. But this smile was a bit forced. Bruise can be clearly seen on the old man's face. In addition, his face was pale and bloodless, giving people a feeling of decline. Looking at the old man's weak appearance, she showed a distressed expression on her face. Thinking of what happened yesterday, she was even more angry, but there was more helplessness. "Alas, they robbed it, so why did you go up? That's our wedding token. How could I watch them rob it? If I were 10 years younger, I would definitely be able to." The old man couldn't help but get angry when he heard this. He wanted to sit up straight, but the slightly bigger movement involved pain. His face suddenly became worse. He held his waist with his hand and gasped in pain. "Oh hiss! How is it? Are you okay?" Seeing this, the old woman couldn't help but feel more distressed, and her eyes were slightly moist. It's okay." The old man waved his hand, slowly leaned back, and muttered, "I really can't refuse to accept my old age." As soon as the silence fell, the old man asked, "How much money is left at home?" The old woman couldn't help but pause when she heard this, and spoke after several seconds. "No matter what, we have to live. Don't think about it now. Just stay calm and recover from your injuries." The old woman naturally knew the family's financial situation and didn't continue. The old woman also fell silent when she saw this, and stood up after a while. "Are you hungry? I'll prepare breakfast for you." The old woman who went out looked even more haggard. Those people took away all their savings and even beat them up. If they had money, they would have gone to the hospital long ago instead of being forced to recover at home. The old woman came to the kitchen to check the food, and it was almost finished. At that time, she could only sell the house. Ah! The old woman sighed and started to prepare breakfast. But she suddenly found a cloth bag on the kitchen table. When was it put there? The old woman was a little strange, but she often forgot things, so she didn't care too much and walked over to open it. It looked like clothes were cut and wrapped randomly, but the things inside made the old woman exclaim. One hand covered her mouth and the other hand pressed her rapidly beating heart. Her voice alerted the old man in the house and shouted outside. "What's wrong? What happened?" "Nothing." The old woman shouted, fearing that her husband would get out of bed, and hurried to the room. But this time her footsteps were not as heavy as before, but seemed a little brisk. As soon as she entered the room, she saw the old man struggling to get up, and hurried over to hold him down, complaining, "What are you doing? What happened just now? Are you okay?" The old man didn't care about himself, but asked a question instead. "It's okay. Wait a minute." The old woman smiled and went out again to get the cloth bag and spread it on the bed. "This." The old woman saw something in the cloth bag at first glance, and reached out to pick it up with trembling hands, with an expression of disbelief on her face. The old woman reached out and grabbed her husband's hand and said excitedly, "Yes, someone sent it back. Just get it back." The old man grabbed his wife's hand with his backhand and put the ring on her hand again. A trace of color appeared on his pale face, and a smile appeared again. The old man also found a note in the package and opened it to read it. The words written on the note were neat in shape, but a little strange in the details. However, these two old people did not see it. They only knew that the content above was that the criminals would be killed, the things would be returned, and there would be some compensation. The two people took inventory and found that the valuable jewelry that had been stolen was not bad at all, and there was indeed more money. In addition, there are 2 bottles of moo milk in the package. The two old men looked at this note and couldn't help crying with joy. Similar things happened in many places in Jaban City. When I woke up in the morning, I found that there was an extra package at home for no reason. It contained stolen property. If there was any damage, I would bring compensation. Honey, our money is back. Oh. Some good person can help us. Thank God. The ordinary people involved in this incident have emerged from the haze shrouded by Team Rocket, but they are only a small part of Jaban City, an insignificant part. The shadow from Team Rocket is still lingering over Jaban City. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 188. Chapter 188 Extra Nobuhiko, 1. The Rainbow City at night is truly worthy of its name, with neon lights of all colors dyeing the entire sky colorful. Life below is equally colorful, especially in the southern part of the city, which is specially designated for tourists to play. You can't see anything during the day, but at night this land reveals a vigorous but equally deformed vitality. And those big shots gathered in the east of the city, where there are all kinds of the best hotels and clubs in Rainbow City and even Kanto. In the magnificent building, banquets are slowly unfolding as night falls. Even the extremely luxurious chandelier hanging high on the ceiling can't illuminate the faces of people, but people who come and go greet each other with smiles even if they don't know each other. The sound of wine glasses colliding during the clinking of glasses sounds more like the sound of gold coins colliding. Under the dim light, fat maggots twisted awkwardly on the dance floor, but they were greeted with cheers. Xinyan was also among them, but his clothes were no longer as casual as they were in the mall, but a tight black dress. Xinyan, who was quite ordinary at first, suddenly became an upper-class person in a suit and tie, but he sat in a corner, with his back straight, serious expression, and eyes looking forward as if he had no emotions. He exuded a cold aura, which seemed to be the opposite of the lively banquet outside. At the beginning of the banquet, there were several gorgeously dressed ladies who came to chat with them, saying that they were looking for dance partners, but after being rejected many times, no one came again. Or maybe Xinyan's aura was daunting, and he was the only one in the booth. And there was a glass of water in front of him. "Why, don't you like it here?" A gorgeous girl in a red evening dress suddenly sat next to Xinyan, crossed her legs, leaned against the sofa, one hand on the sofa, and the other hand holding a high-foot glass. "Teacher," Xinyan's body suddenly tensed up, and his originally correct sitting posture froze. "Relax, it's not work time now, don't be like a stone. Why didn't you go dancing just now? Didn't you like me or what?" The girl shook the wine glass in her hand, and then pointed the glass at Nobuhiko. The crystal red wine in the glass was like flowing amber. She looked at him through the glass, and the smile on her face was not concealed at all. "We are Junsha, teacher, please be serious." Xinyan looked at the helpless face of the girl, raised his hand to push the wine glass away, and complained, "You said you would take me to learn something after get off work. Don't be like this after work, can't you take a break? You have only been here for a few days, give yourself some time, don't think about learning in one day." The girl still smiled and raised the wine glass in front of Xinyan again. The faint smell of alcohol sprayed out and then dissipated in the already turbid air. "Come and drink some." "Teacher, you are drunk." Xinyan reached out and gently took off the wine glass and put it aside. "If there is nothing else, I will leave first, I have something to do at home." Just as he was about to get up, Xinyan said again, "I will wash this dress and return it to the teacher." "Hey, don't leave." The girl dragged Xinyan back with one hand and pressed him with the other hand. After glancing around, she whispered, "Have you forgotten the purpose of our coming here?" "Purpose?" Xinyan was stunned for a moment. Before coming, the teacher told him that he came here to study, but what can he learn here? "You are still too young, and there is still a lot to learn." The girl seemed to be passing by suddenly. Every city has its own characteristics, and socializing is inevitable in Rainbow City. "Even I can't get away, let alone you." The girl was a little helpless when she said this, but soon she became that way again, and approached Xinyan and asked mischievously, "Have you taken a fancy to that one? I will help you." "Teacher." Xinyan sat down helplessly and didn't say to leave, and the girl quickly re-entered the banquet. Xinyan looked at the scene in front of him and murmured, "Learn." There is a saying in Rainbow City that the banquet can't stop. Xinyan also deeply understands this, and it was very late until the girl took him out. "Have you learned it?" Nobuhiko, who was still breathing fresh air, shook his head when he heard this question and said, "I can't learn it." "Just get used to it." The girl didn't care about Nobuhiko's attitude at all. She smiled and stuffed a bunch of keys she had just taken from the waiter into his hand. "Take it, otherwise you won't be able to get back tonight. Remember to report on time tomorrow." After that, she released her wind speed dog and rode on it, stroking the wind speed dog's hair and said, "Go home." After that, she buried her head in the wind speed dog and hugged its neck with both hands. The wind speed dog seemed to have gotten used to it a long time ago and was not surprised at all. It kicked its legs and ran out, leaving the confused Nobuhiko looking at the keys in his hand. He seemed to understand what his purpose was. I'm afraid that his teacher was afraid of drunk driving and caught him here to be a substitute driver. For a while, Nobuhiko felt a bit amused and helpless. Is this the case? Just say no directly. Nobuhiko walked to the front of the car with a helpless look on his face. This is a motorcycle, but it is not the kind that patrols normally, but a black motorcycle. I don't know if it will work, but it should be possible. Nobuhiko inserted the key with a little trepidation. It was his first time driving this kind of car. He had driven patrol cars before, so he thought the difference should not be too big. After a while, a black lightning bolt rushed out from the garage door. At this time, there were few pedestrians on the street. Only rows of street lamps were neatly arranged on both sides of the road, letting the weak light shine on the ground. Xinyan felt the strong wind blowing on his body under the helmet. The scenery flashing by on both sides made him a little dazed, as if he had returned to that night. Fire, crying, blood. The constantly flashing back images seemed to occupy his brain. Anger, fear, panic. Several twisted emotions were like a big hand squeezing his heart. He could feel the despair. He could hear his violent heartbeat. A feeling of suffocation came from his brain, but he seemed to be unable to control himself, and his body was shaking. Because he saw it again. What happened that day suddenly flooded into his mind, even if he didn't know how many times this had happened, but still. Beep, a horn sounded suddenly, and Xinyan felt a piercing chill rushing from his spine to his brain when he saw the scenery in front of him. He only had time to turn the front of the car instinctively, and then past the oncoming truck. Huh, huh, huh. Nobuhiko stopped, took off his helmet, breathed the air greedily, looked back at the long brake mark, and felt a sense of fear. Because I can't use too much space in the main text to show a character, but this character is related to the subsequent plot, in order to let everyone have a certain understanding of this character, so I wrote a side story. But if you don't like it, I won't write it in the future. Give some advice, I need you. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 189. Chapter 189 Extra Xinyan Chapter 2. No matter how prosperous a city is, there are always places where filth and dirt are hidden, and Rainbow City also has such a place. If the south of the city is where tourists gather and the east of the city is the rich area, then the west of the city is the slum. In the past, the west of the city was the industrial area of Rainbow City, with a large number of factories. Although the environment was not very good, the situation was not much different. People lived and worked in peace and contentment, and had supporting resources. However, since a large number of factories moved away, many workers lost their jobs, and Rainbow City had no response strategy, which led to the decline of the west of the city. The industrial area that used to be the pillar of Rainbow City has also become the slum. And his parents were once workers. A dilapidated low building, the original gray-white exterior wall has almost fallen off, revealing the brick wall structure inside, and the part that has not fallen off has turned yellow. At that time, his parents were still small leaders in the company, and this was bought at an internal price after the company's industry was built. But when those factories moved away, this place was worthless. It's just that there are traces of their family's past life here, but things have changed. Push the motorcycle aside and put it away, then find something to cover the motorcycle. It's a mess here at night. If something happens to the motorcycle, how can he explain to the teacher? This residential building has 8 floors, and his home is on the 6th floor. There is no elevator, only stairs, and the stair lights are not voice controlled, but the kind of timer lights that need to be pressed by hand. Nobuhiko didn't press it. He has walked this staircase for more than 10 years and would not go wrong with his eyes closed. But when he arrived at the door of his house, Nobuhiko hesitated and took out the key but didn't insert it. Nobuhiko listened attentively to the house, but there was no sound. He stood outside the door for a while before carefully opening the door. It was pitch black behind the door, but Nobuhiko didn't turn on the light. Instead, he tiptoed to change his shoes and walked in. When he saw the person curled up on the sofa in the living room, his heart softened, and he walked over and whispered, "Rina, Rina." Brother is back." Rina reached out and touched Nobuhiko's face, then said, "You've worked hard today. Haven't you eaten yet? I'll go heat it up." After that, Rina sat up and wanted to get up, but Nobuhiko stopped her and asked in a serious tone, "Didn't you eat again?" Rina's neck shrank slightly when she heard this, as if she had anticipated what she was going to face. "Didn't I tell you that if I don't come back, you can eat first? Don't wait for me. Also, don't wait for me to come back in the future, go to sleep when you're tired. What if you catch a cold here?" Nobuhiko is not the kind of person who likes to talk a lot, but facing Rina, he feels uneasy no matter how much he says. "But I want to eat with my brother," Rina said, a little aggrieved. When Nobuhiko heard this, he surrendered immediately and coaxed, "I know, I will come back earlier next time." "Ha ha ha." Rina reached out and hugged Nobuhiko, saying, "Brother is the best." Okay, Nobuhiko frowned. He knew that he would definitely do this, but he still had to say it. "Then I'll go heat up the food." Rina let go of Nobuhiko and was about to get up, but was held down again. "I'll do it, you sit for a while. Brother has been working all day, he must be very tired, let me do it." "Sit down," Nobuhiko suddenly shouted in a low voice, his tone was like anger. "How many times have I told you? Don't go into the kitchen. It's been so many years, what are you afraid of?" Rina didn't dare to refute, just whispered something. Nobuhiko saw that she didn't continue to ask, so he got up and walked to the other side to turn on the light. The fluorescent tube lit up, and the bright light drove away the darkness of the room, and the room felt a little bit like home. The furniture is old-fashioned. There are no large appliances in the house except for the TV and refrigerator, but there is a new microwave oven. Compared with the dilapidated exterior wall, there is nothing wrong with the house, and everything is tidied in order. Although it is very simple, it has a sense of home, that kind of faint warmth. Nobuhiko looked at Rina sitting on the sofa, and a feeling of heartache began. Rina sat under the light. She was wearing an old shirt that was not suitable in style or specifications, but she was wearing a pair of gray work pants on her lower body. It can be seen that the pants are a bit old, after all, they were originally blue. Rina has a delicate appearance. Although her facial features cannot be said to be very delicate, she is very attractive on this face, giving people a gentle and pleasant feeling, but her eyes are different from those of ordinary people. They are not smart, but a little dull, as if they have no focus. "What's wrong with my brother?" Rina stood up and reached out to touch around, and her footsteps were also small steps. It's okay." Rina's gentle voice brought Nobuhiko back to his senses, and he hurried over to grab her hand. "Why did you get up?" "It's okay, I know everyone in the house, I won't bump into you." Rina didn't care, and answered him with a smile. Okay, sit down for a while." Nobuhiko took Rina aside, let her sit down, and then went into the kitchen. Years of life have made Nobuhiko familiar with all this, and soon several dishes were heated up. "Come and eat." Nobuhiko took Rina's hand and led her to the dining table. Rina sat down carefully with her hands on the table, then pulled Nobuhiko and said, "Why does my brother smell like alcohol?" "The teacher took me to a banquet today, and I didn't drink." Nobuhiko explained to her casually. "I know." Rina smiled when she heard Nobuhiko's explanation. It was not obvious at first, but under the light, the phrase "smile is blooming" seemed to be tailor-made for Rina. To exaggerate a little, it can be said that when she smiled, the brightness of the light dropped by 2 points. Because of Rina's eye problem, Nobuhiko could only prepare a separate portion for her. "Come on, you eat first." Nobuhiko pushed a lunchbox in front of Rina and put her hand down. Years of cooperation made the two of them very tacit, and Rina touched the lunchbox at once. She was also hungry. For a long time to wait for Nobuhiko to come home, and any politeness was unnecessary for the two of them. "Eat, be careful." Nobuhiko sat aside and watched Rina eat in small bites. The fatigue of the day disappeared at this moment, and only a touch of warmth filled the air. No need to worry about criminals, patrols, complicated knowledge, and even less about that unreliable teacher. "So brother is full," Rina said mischievously after eating for a while and not hearing Nobuhiko taking food to eat. But there was no response. Rina was not surprised at all, but ate more quietly, and only faint chewing sounds were heard in the whole room. She knew that her brother fell asleep again. To be honest, it is not easy to write a side story. Suddenly changing the mindset to become a supporting role, if the response is not good, there is no need to write it, it is laborious. What happened to Nobuhiko before? Is his life experience so simple? What is the past involved? What is the relationship between Nobuhiko and Rina? What role does the teacher play? Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 190. Shiu. Wake up. The shouting was accompanied by a violent knock on the door that woke Shiu up. Last night's experience made him a little sensitive, so he got up from the bed immediately, looked around and found that it was the room in the elf center, which made him feel a little more at ease. Listening to the voice outside, Shiu knew it was Daramu. He shook his head to wake himself up before going to open the door. But as soon as he opened the door, Daramu pushed the door in arrogantly, which made Shiu a little confused for a moment. What happened? Why is Droe so impatient? What happened? Shiu asked, looking at Daramu, who came in with a stern face. You still have the nerve to say that? Daramu frowned, his eyes were sharp. What did you do last night? I went to see the warehouse last night to see what I could do. Shiu didn't show any panic when he heard this. Instead, he smiled slightly, closed the door unusually calmly, turned around and walked inside. Okay, you smell of blood, I can smell it from 2 streets away. Daramu followed him in with a look of disgust, occupied the only chair without ceremony, and continued to speak while looking at Shiu, who was pouring water. More than 30 people died last night. The time of death was different. The location basically spanned half of Jaban City. The causes of death were also different. However, most of the scenes were extremely bloody and strange, and the deceased were all involved. He's done robbery and has a rockets background. Yes, it was indeed me. Shiu casually leaned on the table, raised the water glass and took a full sip, with a relaxed and casual look on his face. Since Dro can feel the remnants of those traces, there is nothing to say. Are you out of control? Daramu looked at him alertly, with a strange expression. No. Shiu curled his lips, with a hint of casualness in his tone. Doctor, your data is not accurate. A total of 37 people died, but it was really me who did it, only 33 people, and the other 4 I didn't kill him. Shiu's words really shocked Droe. 33 lives were taken away with just one word, because his disregard for life has reached an inhuman level. This person. Shiu smiled softly when he saw Droe's strange and surprised expression. Doctor, don't worry. I am not out of control, but very rational. Otherwise, these people will not be the only ones to die. Before Daramu could say anything, he took the initiative to explain. These people are divided into 7 small groups in total. In fact, not all of them belong to Team Rocket. There are leaders of Team Rocket, and there are also individual members. But what they have in common is that they are gangsters entrenched in Jaban City. They have been engaged in underworld activities for many years, including stealing, abducting, and bullying men and women. Anyway, they do all kinds of evil and bully ordinary people. And this time they got the support of some mysterious forces, obtained the official patrol map, the destruction plan and retreat route specially designed for them, as well as a safe house to stay in. Of course, there was also the most important elf in it. Doctor, what do you think they did when they obtained these things when the authorities had no time to care? Shiu stopped at this point, took out the notebook from his body, tore out 5 pages, and handed it over. Droki took the paper and looked at it with a serious expression. On it were the names of the people, followed by what they had done. As he continued to look at them one by one, Dromu's expression became more and more gloomy, with an aura of unknown meaning surrounding him. It's very unpleasant, isn't it? Shiu's face lost the sense of relief. He put the water glass to his lips, held it a little, and then continued. These rotten people suddenly gained power and killed 22 people in just 2 days. Do you know the torture those people suffered before they died? They should have had a good life. Shiu, who was fine at first, suddenly stopped. His expression was a little dazed, as if he was remembering something, and he didn't even notice that the water glass in his hand tipped over and flowed into his hand. There was a little girl who looked to be only 11 or 12 years old. When I saw her, she was naked and tied to the bed. Her body was covered with scars. Her eyes were wide but expressionless. When I rescued her, I found that she couldn't even move. Her cheeks were red and swollen, her neck was pinched until it was purple and blue, her right hand was directly twisted, 3 ribs were broken, her hair was violently pulled and bleeding, and her chest was covered with blood. The lower abdomen was even burned by flames. Droki was stunned when he heard Shiu's description. His seriousness gradually faded and he fell into an inexplicable emotion. I treated and comforted her for a while before she temporarily regained some consciousness, but she could no longer cry. This was the first time I knew the tears had really dried up. Shiu's tone was calm, but Dromu noticed something strange bursting out of him and gradually spreading. It's just that Shiu seemed to be in some strange situation, just talking to himself, not noticing his changes at all. I handed her the 3 men and a knife, and I watched her walk in front of those men with her right hand hanging down and her body hunched over. Insults, threats, cries, begging for mercy, all kinds of voices went back and forth in the room, but her left hand was extremely firm and stabbed until the 3 people were dead. But at this time, she didn't have any pleasure in revenge. She just turned her head and said thank you to me in a voice that was so hoarse that it was almost inaudible, and then gave herself the last knife. Alas, Dromu on the side heard this, looked helpless and could only sigh. I watched her fall to the ground and was about to go over to save her, but at that moment I saw light in her eyes, and my body seemed to be frozen in that moment, and my mind went blank. Is that relief or something? Then I saw her stretching her hand into the air, as if she had caught something, and a smile appeared on her face. She must have seen the most beautiful thing in her life. Until his hands became weak and his pupils gradually became dilated. I can't blame you. Dromu felt his chest tightening just listening to Shiu's description, let alone Shiu, a person who experienced it personally. Actually, I already knew she would do this. Shiu's tone returned to calmness, as if everything just now was an illusion. From the moment I rescued her, I knew her heart was dead. Those garbage men killed her parents in front of her, and then took her away. She no longer has a home, and living is not important to her. Just painful. Hearing this, Droe couldn't hold back anymore. The muscles on his cheeks undulated, and there was anger in his eyes. But Shiu calmly said to him, "Doctor, I can understand that you are unclear about this, but I know that I was very calm at the time.